Looking at some DD on Reddit here that explains why the squeeze or the mother of all short squeezes, the Moass, is taking a while to happen. Very detailed post we're going to go through today, but does some of the key points that people have been thinking over the last 6 months and sums up why the Moass is taking longer than expected. But in the short term, let's have a look at GameStop's price right now. It's up just over a percent on the day and at $182.59. Lows of 178 and highs of 186. And if we look at the year chart here, you can see that it's still following this line of support. It hasn't broke below it and is actually on the upside again. And if we just look at the MACD here, you can see that this is actually quite a bullish move here, because the last time that we saw big greens, you can see that this is now green. The signal lines and MACD lines have crossed, and the last time we saw something like this was in May, just before the jump up to 360. So hopefully we can see a similar thing there. Just before we get into DD, can you please give a like on the video? Lots of love on the last one. Really appreciate it. Really helping me out, and in turn I'm going to keep helping you guys out as much as I can. So this post here is by a user called Cryant. I've definitely brought this guy before, and this is piecing together the in the money calls and out the money puts. Melvin was margin called in January 25th and swapped the risk to Citadel. Melvin bought up those out the money puts from Citadel, hoping to profit off their original shorts, but the expirations of the out the money puts do nothing. So I'm going to touch upon some points, go through the too long didn't read, and then you guys can have a thought about this. So price injection on the 25th of May, Melvin were margin called at $96 a share. They were established in 2014 and they had intense focus on the short side. And as you can see here, these guys went from almost 1 billion to 22 billion in by the end of 2020, and that's from almost 6 years. They went up 22x. Now, if we have a look at the price of GME, they're speculating that this is when they were getting involved. So you can see here, this is when they were established, and there was massive short interest down this point. 0.72 and Citadel joined in here, but Melvin were the most overextended, getting in at around $36 a share. Went down and down and down and down, then boom, shot up quite dramatically. So why is that important? Well, it closed at $65 on the 22nd and $96 on the 25th, and this was when Melvin were most likely margin called, and in order for them not to get liquidated, they asked to post around 2.75 billion into their account, and this is where Citadel and 0.72 comes in. At this point, it was Citadel's and 0.72's best interest for Melvin to not get forced to cover. It was their best interest to get them bailed out, then swap a risk of the short position, swap the risk to Citadel as they're a market maker and they can hold the bag and they can squeeze harder and have special privileges. So just a quick summary, Melvin's been shorting since inception, 0.72 and Citadel joined in a little bit. Melvin accrued a massive bag of shorts and got margin called around $95, $96, and they had a 12 billion loss, around 53% of their entire portfolio at the time. 0.72 in Citadel sent the 2.5 billion to Melvin, so they're not liquidated, which would have forced Melvin to close their positions on the open market, but they did not. So it swaps the risk to Citadel. Thus 0.72 and the Citadel, the hedge fund, are saved. So you can see here 53% loss. They back them with 2.5 billion, and it continues. It doesn't get margin called. The positions don't get closed. So they're the most extended. They swap the risk. And let's just go here. Melvin supposedly closed that position on the 27th of Jan. The price dropped down, and you can see that the in the money calls of the short position. So what happened then again? Well, Melvin buys the in the money calls from Citadel. They're using deep in the money calls with little open interest and volume, so the trades are almost guaranteed between the two parties. This means they're locked in their losses at 53%. Citadel does not have the shares for the calls, so they're going to be exercised. So they borrow the shares without liquidating them, which is what they're doing here. They're creating synthetic shares or borrowing them without even guaranteeing that they can return them and feeding in the money calls. Citadel can do this because they are a market maker. They are a market maker. They can't. They have a lot more access compared to other hedge funds. Melvin exercises the in the money calls from Citadel. Melvin exercises the in the money calls from Citadel, and they use the shares to gather positions. Citadel is left holding the bag. So if we just have a look at this quick summary again, they short position, they do the in the money calls to buy, Citadel are selling, they inject the cash, they lock in the 53% losses, and they don't go bankrupt. Then in the next section, Melvin can potentially make profit again without the money puts by repositioning the portfolio, and I won't get into this one quickly, but you can see that they have closed out the position and repositioned its portfolio. You can see there's 1.1 million puts created prior to the 29th of Jan, and if we just go to a summary here, they've locked in their loss of 53%. They buy up all the out of the money puts, and overconfidence play thinking retail will sell. Obviously, retail has not sold. They gain 22% as they become in the money, and game drops back down to 40%. Their gains are wiped out immediately once it rallies back, and the puts are now expire worthless on the March, April, and July expiry dates. All of the puts expire worthless. They go back to their original losses at 53%, and they have not closed out if they had not closed down their position in the risk swap, they'll be posting much higher losses, a game at 180 rather than 53% when it was at 96. So that would have probably wiped them out at that point. So you can see here they gained 22% when the out the money options. You can see here they gained 22% when the prices dropped down, and they were everything. People were saying that they were now in a good position, but then once the prices shot back up again, all of these expired worthless. So conclusion in bullet form. This is basically everything that sums it up. So Melvin was margin called and required 2.5 billion liquidated. They were the most overextended. 0.72 and Citadel were at a much lower price point. They posted 0.42, posted 50% loss in January, and then once it hit 350, we know that the shutdown of buys happened, where Robinhood was not allowing people to buy, and that was when the price freeze happened and the price dropped down. Then Melvin, they closed out the short position using in the money calls from Citadel, had liquidity in the market, and they were the most overextended short hedge fund, and now Citadel, the market maker, or the bag holder. So after that, Melvin can report that their short positions on their balance sheet and short interest drops from 226% to 30%, and now they're holding the bag. They can kick the short position down kick the can of the short position and keep it from appearing on the short interest. They can borrow shares without locating them for the sake of liquidity. Melvin lost the 12.5 billion, and they aren't forced to cover, and then they're also saved from doing the margin price at 96. They could have profited off it, but they decided to be greedy and did not. These out the money puts expired. Melvin lost all of their profits, and Citadel hold the bag. Melvin doesn't need to open up more out the money puts if the Moass is. Melvin doesn't need to open up more out the money puts if the Moass is looking more and more likely. They've escaped with just 53% losses, so they've out of the picture at this point, and if they didn't close it, they would have lost more than 53%, as it's now trading at 180. So that's why basically they got their 22% and now went down to 50. So, and this is kind of the key line here, this does not mean that there will be no squeeze. It's just showing that Citadel, who are much larger than Melvin, are now holding the bag, and that is why it is taking longer than everyone is expecting. So don't be worried, is the long summary of this. Citadel are a market maker and have a lot more tools in the toolbox than Melvin, so this is why the short squeeze is taking longer. So just remember, guys, keep on holding, support the DD, follow the DD, read the DD, and if you believe in it, just keep on holding. Hold. Right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.